Robert Williams had always been a creature of habit. At 52 years old, the tech company owner worth over $100 million could afford to eat at the fanciest restaurants in Chicago every single night. He could hire private chefs, book exclusive dining rooms, or fly to Paris just for dinner if he wanted to. But instead, every Tuesday evening at exactly 6:30, he walked through the red wooden door of Tony's Italian Kitchen, a small family restaurant tucked between a laundromat and a flower shop on Maple Street. The restaurant wasn't much to look at. The checkered tablecloths had seen better days. The walls were decorated with faded photos of Italy, and the carpet had worn thin spots where countless customers had walked. But Robert didn't care about fancy decorations or expensive wine lists. After building his software company from nothing and selling it for more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, he had learned that simple things often brought the most peace. Table 12 had become his table. It sat in the corner by the window, far enough from the kitchen noise, but close enough to watch the street outside. The wooden chair creaked a little when he sat down, and the table wobbled slightly if you pressed too hard on one side. Robert had mentioned the wobbly table to the owner once, but Tony had just laughed and said it gave the place character. After 3 years of Tuesday dinners, Robert had grown fond of that wobble. He always ordered the same thing: chicken parmesan with a side of garlic bread and a glass of red wine. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make the kitchen work too hard. Robert had spent enough years in boardrooms with complicated meals and business dinners that lasted for hours. Now he just wanted food that tasted like home, even though he had never really known what home was supposed to feel like. The staff at Tony's knew him by now, though they probably didn't know his real name or what he did for work. He paid in cash, tipped well, and never caused any trouble. To them, he was just the quiet guy who came in every Tuesday, read papers while he ate, and always said please and thank you. That was exactly how Robert liked it. Lisa Martinez had been his waitress for most of those 3 years. She was 28 years old with kind brown eyes and a smile that seemed genuine even during the busiest nights. Robert noticed things about people. It was part of what made him successful in business, and he had noticed that Lisa treated every customer the same way. Whether they ordered the expensive seafood special or just a cup of coffee, she never tried to make small talk beyond asking about his meal or mentioning the weather. Some waitresses would hover around his table, probably sensing that he might be someone important, but Lisa gave him space. She would bring his wine, take his order, check on him once during the meal, and bring the bill when he was ready. Professional but not cold, friendly but not pushy. Robert appreciated that balance. He had spent decades having people want things from him: investors wanting money, employees wanting promotions, family members wanting handouts. In his regular life, every conversation seemed to have an agenda hiding underneath. But Lisa just wanted to do her job well and make sure his chicken parmesan stayed hot. What Robert didn't know was that Lisa was fighting her own battles. Every Tuesday when she served him his dinner, she was usually on hour 10 of what would be a 14-hour day. She worked the lunch shift at Tony's, then rushed across town to her evening job at a medical office, then came back to Tony's for the dinner rush. Her feet hurt constantly, and she survived on coffee and the energy bars she kept in her purse. Lisa was putting her younger brother through medical school, and the bills never seemed to stop coming. Tuition, books, lab fees, living expenses, it all added up to more money than she had ever imagined. Her brother Daniel was brilliant and kind, the type of person who would make an amazing doctor, but their parents had died when he was just starting college. Lisa had become his family, his support system, and his financial lifeline all at once. She had dreams once, too. Before her parents' accident, before the responsibilities and the bills and the endless work schedule, Lisa had been something else entirely. But that was a lifetime ago, as she had learned not to think about it too much. Thinking about the past just made the present harder to bear. Robert never knew about any of this. To him, Lisa was simply the efficient waitress who remembered that he liked extra garlic bread and never put ice in his wine glass. He left generous tips because he could afford to and because good service deserved recognition, but he never thought much about where Lisa went after his Tuesday dinner was finished. The restaurant itself had its own rhythm that Robert had become. Part of Tuesday nights were usually quiet, with just a handful of regulars and the occasional family celebrating a birthday or anniversary. The kitchen would start winding down around 9, and by 9:30, most of the customers would be gone. Robert usually finished his meal by 8, but sometimes he would linger over his wine, answering emails on his phone or reviewing documents for the next day's meetings. Tony, the owner, would sometimes stop by his table to chat. Tony's father had opened the restaurant 40 years ago, and Tony had grown up rolling meatballs in the back kitchen. He was proud of the place, even though it wasn't fancy. He knew that good food and honest service would always bring people back, and he was right. Tony's had regular customers who had been coming for decades. The walls of the restaurant told stories. There were photos of Tony's family, pictures of regular customers at their anniversary dinners, and newspaper clippings about local events where Tony's had catered the food. It was the kind of place where people proposed to their girlfriends, celebrated graduations, and held birthday parties for their grandparents. Robert had watched dozens of these celebrations from his corner table. He had seen first dates that blossomed into relationships and families that grew over the years. Sometimes he felt like a ghost watching other people's lives unfold, present but not really part of the story. That was fine with him, or at least he told himself it was fine. Robert had learned that getting too involved with people usually led to complications. Business had taught him to keep relationships simple and clear. Personal connections were messy and unpredictable, and Robert had built his success on control and predictability. But on this particular Tuesday evening in November, something was about to change that would turn Robert's orderly world upside down. He had no idea that his quiet routine was about to be shattered by a moment so unexpected and beautiful that it would haunt him for weeks to come. As Robert settled into his wobbly chair at table 12 and Lisa approached with his usual glass of red wine, neither of them could have imagined that their simple customer-waitress relationship was about to become something much more complicated and meaningful than either had ever planned. The Tuesday evening in November started like any other. Robert walked through the familiar red door of Tony's Italian kitchen at his usual time, nodding to Tony, who was wiping down the bar. The restaurant felt different, though, quieter than normal. Only 3 other tables were occupied, and the usual dinner rush seemed to have stayed home because of the cold rain that had been falling all day. Lisa appeared at his table within moments, carrying his glass of red wine. But Robert noticed something different about her tonight. She looked tired, more so than usual. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her smile seemed to take more effort than normal. She had been working extra shifts lately, though Robert didn't know why. "Good evening, Mr. Williams," she said, setting down his wine. "The usual tonight?" Robert nodded, watching as she scribbled his order on her notepad. Her hands were shaking slightly, probably from carrying heavy trays all day. He almost asked if she was feeling all right, but caught himself. That would cross the line from customer to something more personal, and Robert had learned to keep those lines clear. As Lisa walked back toward the kitchen, Robert pulled out his phone to check emails. But before he could focus on work, he heard voices coming from the front of the restaurant. Tony was talking to 2 men in work clothes who were struggling to fit something large through the front door. "Careful with that corner," Tony called out. "It's supposed to go right over there by the window." Robert looked up from his phone to see what was causing the commotion. The 2 workers were maneuvering what looked like a large piece of furniture, wrapped in thick moving blankets. Whatever it was heavy and awkward, and they were having trouble getting it through the narrow doorway without bumping into the tables. Nearby, other customers had stopped eating to watch the spectacle. An elderly couple at table 4 was craning their necks to get a better view, while a family with 2 young children had turned completely around in their chairs to see what was happening. "What's all this about?" called out Mrs. Peterson, a regular customer who came in every Tuesday with her husband. Tony grinned and wiped his hands on his apron. "It's a surprise," he said. "Something I've been planning for months." The workers finally managed to get the mysterious object through the door and began carefully moving it toward the corner of the restaurant where Tony was pointing. Robert watched with growing curiosity as they positioned it exactly where Tony wanted it, then began unwrapping the thick blankets. What emerged made Robert's breath catch in his throat. It was a piano. Not just any piano, but a beautiful black baby grand that gleamed under the restaurant's warm lights. The wood was polished to a mirror shine, and even from across the room, Robert could see that this was a quality instrument, not some cheap decoration. The restaurant fell completely silent for a moment. Even the kitchen noise seemed to stop as everyone stared at the unexpected addition to Tony's humble dining room. The piano looked almost out of place among the checkered tablecloths and faded Italy photos, like a diamond sitting on a bed of pebbles. "Tony, where on earth did that come from?" Mrs. Peterson asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Tony's chest puffed up with pride. "A generous customer donated it," he explained. "Said he thought some live music might make the place even more special. Isn't she beautiful?" Robert felt a strange tightness in his chest as he looked at the piano. It reminded him of something from long ago, something he had tried very hard not to think about for many years. His mother had owned a piano just like this one, and she used to play for him when he was young. But that was before everything fell apart, before she got sick, before the music stopped forever. The workers finished their job and left, and slowly the normal restaurant sounds returned. Conversations resumed, forks clinked against plates, and the kitchen got back to its usual rhythm. But Robert couldn't stop staring at the piano. It sat there like a sleeping giant, waiting for someone to bring it to life. That's when he noticed Lisa. She had emerged from the kitchen carrying someone else's order, but when she saw the piano, she froze completely. The plates in her hands trembled, and for a moment Robert thought she might drop them. Her face had gone completely white, and her eyes were fixed on the instrument with an expression Robert had never seen before. It wasn't just surprise or curiosity. It was something much deeper, recognition, maybe, or longing, or fear. Robert couldn't quite identify the emotion, but it was so intense that he found himself leaning forward in his chair, trying to understand what was happening. Lisa stood there for what felt like several minutes, but was probably only a few seconds. Then she seemed to shake herself back to reality, delivered the food to table 7, and disappeared back into the kitchen. But Robert had seen something in that moment, something that made him forget completely about his emails and business documents. The rest of the evening passed in a strange haze. Robert ate his chicken parmesan without really tasting it, his attention split between his usual meal and watching for Lisa to reappear. When she did come back to check on him, she seemed different. Distracted, she refilled his wine glass and asked if he needed anything else, but her eyes kept drifting toward the corner where the piano sat silent and untouched. "Beautiful instrument," Robert said quietly, testing the waters. Lisa's hand jerked slightly as she poured his wine. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is. Do you play?" Robert asked, though something told him he already knew the answer. Lisa's face went through a series of emotions too quick for Robert to follow. "Pain, maybe, or regret?" "Not anymore," she said finally, then hurried away before he could ask anything else. The restaurant began to empty as the evening wore on. The family with children left first, followed by the elderly couple. By 9 o'clock, only Robert and one other customer remained. Tony was in the back office counting the day's receipts, and the kitchen staff was cleaning up for the night. Lisa was wiping down tables and stacking chairs, her movements automatic and efficient. But Robert noticed that she kept avoiding the corner where the piano sat. She cleaned every other table in the restaurant but left the ones nearest the piano for last. And when she finally had to approach that area, she kept her eyes down and worked as quickly as possible. Robert found himself making excuses to stay longer. He ordered another glass of wine he didn't really want, then asked for the dessert menu even though he never ate dessert. He couldn't explain why, but something was telling him that this evening wasn't over yet, that something important was about to happen. By 9:45, the last customer had left, and the kitchen staff had gone home. Tony locked the front door and turned the sign to "closed," then disappeared into his office to finish the night's paperwork. The main dining room was empty except for Robert, who was still nursing his second glass of wine, and Lisa, who was finishing her end-of-shift cleaning. Robert pretended to be absorbed in reading something on his phone, but he was actually watching Lisa out of the corner of his eye. She had finished everything else and was now standing near the piano, staring at it with that same intense expression he had seen earlier. Slowly, almost like she was sleepwalking, Lisa approached the instrument. She reached out one trembling hand and gently touched the keys, not pressing them but just feeling the smooth ivory surface. Then she looked around the empty restaurant, checking to make sure she was alone. She had forgotten about Robert. Sitting quietly in his corner booth, Lisa pulled out the piano bench and sat down slowly, as if the simple act was painful. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Robert held his own breath, sensing that he was about to witness something extraordinary. What happened next would change everything. Lisa sat at the piano bench for what felt like an eternity, her hands hovering just above the keys. Robert could see her from his corner table, though she had no idea he was still there. The entire restaurant was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of Tony's voice on the phone in his office. Robert found himself holding his breath. There was something about the way Lisa was sitting, the reverent way she had touched the piano keys, that told him this moment was important. He had built his fortune by recognizing when something significant was about to happen, and every instinct he had was telling him to pay attention. Finally, Lisa's hand settled on the keys. She didn't start playing right away. Instead, she just sat there with her fingers resting on the ivory, as if she was remembering something from long ago. Robert could see her shoulders rise and fall as she took deep breaths, preparing herself for something. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant. Robert recognized the piece immediately, though he hadn't heard it in years. It was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most beautiful and challenging pieces ever written for piano. His mother used to play this same piece when he was a child, though never with the kind of skill he was hearing now. As Lisa's confidence grew, the music became stronger. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace and precision that took Robert's breath away. This wasn't someone who had learned to play piano as a hobby or taken lessons as a child. This was the kind of playing that came from years of serious training, the kind of technique that only true musicians possessed. Robert felt his wine glass slip from his hand and barely caught it before it hit the table. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The woman who had been serving him chicken parmesan every Tuesday for 3 years, the waitress who worked multiple jobs and always looked tired, was playing classical piano like a concert artist. The music filled the empty restaurant with such beauty that Robert felt tears forming in his eyes. It had been decades since he had heard this piece played live, and never with such emotion. Lisa wasn't just playing the notes correctly. She was pouring her soul into every phrase, every delicate passage, every powerful crescendo. As the piece progressed, Robert began to notice details that most people would miss. The way Lisa's left hand maintained perfect rhythm while her right hand danced through the complex melody. The subtle way she shaped each phrase, making the music breathe and flow like a conversation. The natural expression in her playing that couldn't be taught. Only felt. This was talent at the highest level. Robert had heard enough professional musicians in his lifetime to recognize the difference between someone who played well and someone who was truly gifted. Lisa belonged in the second category, without question, but it wasn't just her technical skill that amazed him, it was the emotion behind the music. Robert could hear years of longing in those notes, as if Lisa was playing out all the dreams she had kept locked away. The music swelled and dipped like waves, carrying with it a story of loss and hope and desperate love for something beautiful. Robert found himself thinking about his mother again. She had played the same piece, but never like this. His mother had been good, very good, but she had never achieved the level of artistry he was witnessing now. She had dreamed of being a concert pianist, but life had gotten in the way. Marriage, children, responsibilities had slowly pushed her musical dreams to the background until they disappeared entirely. Watching Lisa play, Robert felt like he was seeing his mother's unfulfilled dreams come to life. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. The piece built to its famous climax, and Lisa's playing became more passionate, more desperate. Her whole body was involved now, swaying with the music, her face a mask of concentration and emotion. Robert could see that she was completely lost in the music, transported to some other place where waitressing and bills and tired feet didn't exist. Then something unexpected happened. As Lisa played through one of the most beautiful passages of the concerto, tears began streaming down her face. Not the gentle tears of someone moved by music, but the deep, painful tears of someone releasing years of stored-up grief and longing. She kept playing through the tears, never missing a note, never losing the rhythm. If anything, the tears seemed to make her playing even more powerful. Robert felt his own eyes filling up as he watched this remarkable woman pour her heart out through the piano keys. He realized he was witnessing something intensely private, something Lisa had probably never intended anyone else to see. The restaurant had become a confessional, and the piano was her way of speaking truths she couldn't put into words. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, Robert found himself completely captivated. He had forgotten about his wine, his emails, his usual Tuesday evening routine. Nothing existed except Lisa and the music and the incredible privilege of witnessing such raw, honest talent. The final notes rang out through the empty restaurant, hanging in the air like a prayer. Lisa's hands remained on the keys for several moments after the music ended, as if she couldn't bear to break the connection. The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Slowly, Lisa lifted her hands from the piano and wiped the tears from her face. She sat there for a moment, breathing heavily as if she had just run a marathon instead of playing a piece of music. Robert could see that she was shaking slightly, overwhelmed by the emotion she had just released. Robert felt like he had been struck by lightning. In all his years of business success, all his experiences with wealth and power and influence, he had never encountered anything as moving as what he had just witnessed. This wasn't just music. It was a glimpse into someone's soul. He tried to process what he had just learned about Lisa. The woman he had known as a hard-working waitress was actually a musician of extraordinary talent. The kind of talent that belonged on the world's greatest stages, not hidden away in a small Italian restaurant. Questions flooded his mind. Where had she learned to play like this? Why was she working as a waitress instead of performing professionally? What circumstances had led someone with such incredible gifts to be serving chicken parmesan instead of playing in concert halls? Robert realized that he had been completely wrong about Lisa. He had seen her as a simple, hard-working woman who was good at her job. But she was so much more than that. She was an artist, a person with depths he had never imagined. As Lisa finally stood up from the piano bench, Robert saw her glance around the restaurant to make sure she was still alone. She closed the piano lid gently, almost reverently, and wiped away the last of her tears. For a moment, she just stood there looking at the instrument, as if saying goodbye to something precious. Robert knew he should probably leave, pretend he hadn't seen anything, go back to his normal routine of polite customer interactions. But he couldn't. What he had just witnessed was too important, too extraordinary to ignore. He cleared his throat softly. Lisa spun around, her eyes wide with shock and embarrassment. She had completely forgotten that anyone else might still be in the restaurant. Sorry, she stammered, her face turning red. I didn't know anyone was still here. I should have asked before I touched the piano. I'll just ... But Robert was already standing up, walking slowly toward her. His mind was racing, trying to find the right words for this moment that felt like it could change everything. The conversation that followed would alter both their lives forever. Lisa's face went completely pale when she realized Robert had been watching her play. She stood frozen by the piano, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Her hands were still trembling from the intensity of the performance, and now embarrassment was making it even worse. Please don't tell Tony, she said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I shouldn't have touched it without permission. I couldn't help myself when I saw it sitting there. Robert held up his hand gently, trying to calm her down. Lisa, wait. You don't need to apologize for anything. He took a few steps closer, but kept enough distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. What I just heard was incredible. I mean, truly incredible. Lisa shook her head, looking down at her feet. It was nothing. I was just fooling around. I should get back to cleaning up the tables. That wasn't fooling around, Robert said firmly. That was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, played at a professional level. I know because my mother used to play the same piece, though never like that. Lisa's eyes darted up to meet his for just a moment before looking away again. Robert could see the conflict on her face. Part of her seemed relieved that someone had recognized her playing, but another part looked terrified that her secret had been discovered. I used to play a little, she said carefully, still not looking at him directly, a long time ago. Robert moved a little closer to one of the nearby tables and sat down on the edge of it, trying to make himself less intimidating. Lisa, what? I just heard wasn't someone who used to play a little. That was someone with serious training. Years of serious training. The silence stretched between them for several long moments. Robert could hear Tony still talking on the phone in his office, completely unaware of the conversation happening in his dining room. The kitchen was quiet now, all the staff having gone home for the night. Finally, Lisa sank down into one of the chairs at a nearby table. She looked exhausted, as if playing that piece had drained every bit of energy from her body. You wouldn't understand, she said quietly. Try me, Robert said gently. I might understand more than you think. Lisa looked at him with those tired brown eyes, and Robert could see her weighing whether or not to trust him. He had always been good at reading people, and right now he could see that Lisa was carrying a heavy burden, something she had been keeping to herself for a very long time. Why do you care? She asked finally. You're just a customer. This doesn't have anything to do with you. Robert considered his answer carefully. He could have told her about his wealth, about his success, about his ability to help people. But something told him that wasn't what Lisa needed to hear right now. Because what I just witnessed was beautiful, he said simply. And because I can see that you're in pain, and I think that pain has something to do with music. Lisa's composure cracked a little at those words. She put her head in her hands and took several deep breaths. When she looked up again, there were fresh tears in her eyes. I was supposed to be a concert pianist, she said, the words coming out like a confession. That was my whole life, my whole identity. Music was everything to me. Robert nodded encouragingly, not wanting to interrupt her now that she had started talking. I started playing when I was 4 years old, Lisa continued. My parents noticed I could pick out melodies on this old keyboard we had, so they got me lessons. By the time I was 8, my teacher said I was gifted. By 12, I was playing pieces that most adults couldn't handle. She paused, looking toward the piano as if it was calling to her. I got accepted to Juilliard when I was 16. Full scholarship. My parents were so proud. They said I was going to be famous someday, that I was going to play in all the great concert halls around the world. Robert felt his chest tighten. He had a feeling this story wasn't going to have a happy ending. What happened? He asked gently. Lisa's voice became quieter, more strained. I was halfway through my sophomore year at Juilliard. I was doing well, really well. My professors said I had a bright future ahead of me. I was already getting invited to play with small orchestras, and there was talk of me entering some major competitions. She stopped talking and stared at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. Robert could see that whatever came next was the hardest part of her story. Then I got the phone call, she whispered. It was a Tuesday night, actually. Just like tonight. I was practicing for a recital when my phone rang. It was a police officer calling to tell me that my parents had been in a car accident. Robert felt his stomach drop. He had suspected tragedy was part of Lisa's story, but hearing it confirmed still hit him hard. They died instantly, Lisa continued, her voice completely flat now. The other driver had been drinking. One moment I was worried about a difficult passage in a Mozart sonata, and the next moment I was an orphan. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air between them. Robert wanted to say something comforting, but he knew that sometimes silence was better than empty words. I had a younger brother, Lisa went on. David, he was only 14 when our parents died. Suddenly, I was responsible for him for everything. The funeral, the legal stuff, figuring out how we were going to survive. Robert was beginning to understand now? You had to leave school? Lisa nodded, wiping away tears that were flowing freely now. I tried to stay at first. I thought maybe I could finish the semester, get David into a good boarding school or something. But he was so lost. So scared he needed me and the money ... She shook her head. My parents had some life insurance, but not enough. Not nearly enough. So you dropped out of Juilliard to take care of him. I dropped out of everything, Lisa said bitterly. Music school, my entire future. I packed up my life in New York and moved back home to take care of a grieving teenager who blamed me for taking him away from his friends. Robert could see the pain in her eyes as she remembered those difficult years. That must have been incredibly hard. David was smart. Really smart. Even while he was grieving, his grades stayed good. I knew he could do something amazing with his life if he got the chance, so I made sure he got that chance. Medical school, Robert said, remembering something she had mentioned before. Lisa's face brightened just a little. He's in his final. You're now going to be a doctor just like he always dreamed. He's going to help people, save lives. It's exactly what he should be doing, and you've been supporting him all these years. 2 jobs, sometimes 3, Lisa confirmed. Whatever. It took. The tuition payments, books, living expenses, lab fees. Do you know how expensive medical school is? Robert did know, actually, but he didn't think now was the time to mention that. I haven't touched the piano in almost 7 years, Lisa said, looking back toward the instrument that had started this whole conversation. Until tonight. I told myself I didn't miss it, that I had moved on to more important things. But when I saw that piano sitting there, all the feelings came back. Everything came back, Lisa said, her voice breaking again. All the music I used to know, all the pieces I used to love, all the dreams I used to have. It was like opening a door I had locked and forgotten about. Robert sat quietly for a moment, trying to process everything Lisa had told him. Here was a woman who had sacrificed her own extraordinary talent to take care of her family. She had given up a career that could have taken her to the world's greatest stages so that her brother could become a doctor. Does David know? Robert asked. About your music, I mean, about what you gave up for him. Lisa shook her head quickly. No, and I don't want him to know. He's got enough pressure already with medical school. If he knew what I had given up, he'd feel guilty, and guilt won't help him become a better doctor. Robert understood her reasoning, but it also made him sad. Lisa was carrying this burden completely alone, with no one to acknowledge the magnitude of her sacrifice. So, you've been working here for 3 years, serving people like me, pretending that music was never part of your life? It's not pretending, Lisa said firmly. Music isn't part of my life anymore. Tonight was just ... a moment of weakness. It won't happen again. But even as she said the words, Robert could see that she didn't really believe them. The way she had played tonight, the emotion she had poured into that music, wasn't something that could be simply turned off and forgotten. Lisa, Robert said carefully, what if it didn't have to be that way? What if there was another option? Lisa looked at him suspiciously. What do you mean? Robert knew he was about to step into dangerous territory. What he was thinking could change everything, but it could also make things much more complicated. Still, after what he had witnessed tonight, he couldn't just walk away and pretend it had never happened. I mean, what if someone could help? What if David's education could be taken care of and you could go back to music? Lisa's expression hardened. I don't need charity, Mr. Williams. I've been taking care of my family just fine on my own. It wouldn't be charity, Robert said quickly. It would be an investment. In talent that's too extraordinary to waste. The conversation that followed would determine whether Lisa's musical dreams could be resurrected or whether they would remain buried forever. The following Tuesday, Robert walked into Tony's Italian kitchen with a briefcase he had never brought before. Lisa noticed it immediately when she approached his usual table, and she could see something different in his expression too. He seemed More focused, more purposeful than during their previous Tuesday dinners. "Good evening, Mr. Williams," she said, setting down his usual glass of red wine. Her voice was carefully neutral, but Robert could detect a hint of nervousness underneath. They hadn't spoken since the night she had played piano, and Lisa had clearly been dreading this moment all week. "Good evening, Lisa," Robert replied. "Before you take my order, I was wondering if we could talk for a few minutes." "When you have time, of course." Lisa glanced around the restaurant. It was another quiet Tuesday night with only a handful of customers spread across the dining room. She had enough time to talk, but Robert could see that she was reluctant. "I really should focus on my work," she said. "Tony doesn't pay me to chat with customers." "I understand," Robert said patiently. "But what I want to discuss might be important. For your future, and your brother's future too." At the mention of David, Lisa's expression changed. She looked at Robert more carefully, trying to read his intentions. "What do you mean?" "Please, just give me 5 minutes," Robert said. "If you don't like what I have to say, we can go back to our usual routine and never mention it again." Lisa hesitated for a long moment, then pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, but her posture was tense, defensive. "Okay, 5 minutes." Robert opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "I've been thinking about our conversation last week. About your music, about your brother's medical school, about the sacrifices you've made." "Mr. Williams, if this is about charity, I already told you." "It's not charity," Robert interrupted gently. "Let me explain what I'm thinking, and then you can decide for yourself." Lisa crossed her arms but didn't get up from the table. Robert took that as permission to continue. "I'm a businessman, Lisa. I've spent my entire career recognizing valuable opportunities and investing in them. Sometimes those opportunities are companies, sometimes they're technologies, sometimes they're people. I'm not an investment opportunity." Lisa said firmly. "Actually, you are," Robert replied. "What I heard last week was talent at the highest level. The kind of talent that could have a significant impact on the world of classical music, if given the proper support and opportunity." Lisa shook her head. "That's all in the past now. I'm not that person anymore." "But you could be again," Robert said, leaning forward slightly. "Lisa, I want to make you a business proposition. Not charity, not pity, but a real investment deal." Despite herself, Lisa found her curiosity piqued. "What kind of deal?" Robert opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "I'm proposing to cover all of your brother's remaining medical school expenses, tuition, books, living expenses, everything. I'll also pay off your student loans from Juilliard." Lisa's eyes widened. That has to be hundreds of thousands of dollars." "It is," Robert confirmed, "but in exchange, I want you to return to music. Full time. I'll arrange for you to work with the best teachers, give you access to practice facilities, cover all your expenses while you rebuild your skills." Lisa stared at him in disbelief. "You're not serious?" "I'm completely serious," Robert said, "but there are conditions." "This isn't a gift, Lisa. It's an investment, which means I expect a return." "What kind of return?" Lisa asked suspiciously. "Once you're ready, I want you to perform at charity events for my foundation. Corporate events, fundraising galas, that sort of thing. The foundation supports education programs for underprivileged children, so your performances would be helping kids who might not otherwise get opportunities." Lisa was quiet for several minutes, processing what Robert had just proposed. It seemed too good to be true, which made her immediately suspicious. "Why? Would you do this?" she asked finally. "You barely know me. For all you know, I was just having a lucky night last week." "Maybe I'm not as good as you think I am," Robert smiled slightly. "Lisa, I've heard enough professional musicians to know the difference between someone having a lucky night and someone with genuine world-class talent. What I heard last week was the real thing. But why me? There are probably thousands of struggling musicians who would jump at an offer like this." Robert's expression became more serious. "Because most of those struggling musicians chose to struggle. They're pursuing music because they love it, which is admirable, but it's still a choice. You didn't choose to give up music. You were forced to give it up by circumstances beyond your control. There's a difference." Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes again, but she blinked them back. I don't understand what that has to do with anything. It has to do with everything, Robert said quietly. You sacrificed your dreams for someone you love. That tells me something about your character, about the kind of person you are. If I'm going to invest this kind of money in someone, I want to know they're worthy of it. Not just musically, but as a human being. The compliment hit Lisa harder than she expected. She had spent so many years focused on just surviving, just getting through each day, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone believe in her. I can't accept this, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why not? Because it's too much, because I don't deserve it. Because what if I fail? What if I've been away from music too long and I can't get back to where I was? Robert leaned back in his chair. Those are all valid concerns. But let me ask you something. If you don't try, how will you feel in 10 years? 20 years? Will you be satisfied knowing that you had a chance to reclaim your dreams and you turned it down? Lisa didn't answer, but Robert could see that his question had hit home. And what about David? Robert continued. Right now he's going to graduate with enormous debt. Even as a doctor, it will take him years to pay off his student loans. But if you accept my offer, he'll start his career debt-free. He'll be able to focus on being the best doctor he can be instead of worrying about money. David doesn't know about any of this, Lisa said quickly. I don't want him to feel guilty about my choices. He doesn't have to know the details, Robert said. We can structure this so that his expenses are covered by a scholarship or grant. He never has to know it came from me or that it's connected to your music. Lisa was silent for a long time, clearly wrestling with the decision. Robert could see the internal battle playing out on her face. Part of her wanted desperately to say yes, to grab this unexpected lifeline and see where it led. But another part of her was terrified of hoping for something that seemed too good to be true. What if I'm not good enough anymore? She asked quietly. What if 7 years away from music has damaged my abilities beyond repair? Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Robert said simply. But Lisa, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Talent like yours doesn't just disappear. It might be rusty, it might need work, but it's still there. I heard it last week. And if I fail, if I can't perform at the level you expect, what happens then? Robert considered his answer carefully. If you give this everything you have, if you work as hard as you can and it doesn't work out, then at least we'll know we tried. Your brother will still have his medical degree without debt, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you didn't give up without a fight. Lisa looked down at the documents Robert had placed on the table. Even from a distance, she could see they were professionally prepared, with official letterheads and legal language. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment idea. Robert had clearly thought this through carefully. How long would I have to decide? She asked. Take whatever time you need, Robert said. But Lisa, opportunities like this don't come along very often. Sometimes in life you have to take a leap of faith. Lisa picked up one of the documents and skimmed through it. The numbers were staggering. David's remaining tuition alone was more money than she made in 2 years of working both jobs. Why classical music? She asked suddenly. I mean, if you want to invest in someone, wouldn't it make more sense to choose pop music or something more commercially viable? Robert smiled. Because classical music matters. It's been around for centuries, and it will be around for centuries more. It elevates people, inspires them, connects them to something larger than themselves. The world needs more of that, not less. And you really think I could make a difference? I know you could, Robert said with conviction. Lisa, what I heard last week was someone with the ability to move people, to touch their souls through music. That's not something you can teach or fake. You either have it or you don't, and you definitely have it. Lisa felt something stirring inside her that she hadn't felt in years. Hope, terrifying, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, her musical dreams weren't completely dead after all, but with that hope came fear. Fear of failure, fear of disappointment, fear of letting Robert down after he had placed such faith in her. The safe choice would be to politely decline and continue with her current life. It wasn't exciting, but it was predictable. The risky. choice was to believe that she could reclaim the life she had once dreamed of. "I need to think about this," Lisa said finally. 3 weeks later, Lisa stood outside the Chicago Music Conservatory holding a folder with her acceptance letter and class schedule. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold October wind, but from pure terror. It had taken her 2 weeks to finally accept Robert's offer, and even now, walking toward the imposing brick building where she would restart her musical education, part of her wanted to turn around and run back to the safety of Tony's restaurant. The decision hadn't been easy. She had spent countless sleepless nights weighing the pros and cons, imagining every possible way things could go wrong. What if she had lost her abilities? What if she embarrassed herself in front of real musicians? What if Robert realized he had made a terrible mistake and wanted his money back? But in the end, it was David who had unknowingly pushed her toward acceptance. During one of their weekly phone calls, he had mentioned how excited he was about graduating without dents to a surprise scholarship he had received. Hearing the relief and joy in his voice reminded Lisa of why she had made all those sacrifices in the first place. If this opportunity could secure David's future while giving her a chance to reclaim her own dreams, how could she say no? Robert had been true to his word about every detail. David's remaining tuition was covered by what appeared to be a legitimate medical scholarship. Lisa's old student loans from Juilliard had been quietly paid off, and now she was enrolled at the conservatory to work with Professor Elena Rodriguez, one of the most respected piano instructors in the country. Walking through the conservatory's hallways, Lisa felt like she was entering a different world. Young students hurried past her carrying instrument cases, their faces bright with the confidence that came from years of dedicated practice. Practice rooms lined the corridors, and she could hear snippets of music floating through the soundproof doors, violin scales, opera vocal exercises, piano arpeggios played at lightning speed. Lisa found Professor Rodriguez's studio on the third floor. She knocked hesitantly, and a warm voice called for her to enter. The woman who greeted her was in her 60s with silver hair, pulled back in an elegant bun, and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You must be Lisa," Professor Rodriguez said, extending her hand. "Robert has told me so much about you. I am excited to hear you play." The studio was beautiful, with two grand pianos positioned so they faced each other. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, and the walls were covered with photos of famous pianists and concert posters from around the world. This was the kind of room Lisa had dreamed of practicing in when she was younger. "I should probably warn you," Lisa said nervously as she sat down at one of the pianos. "It's been 7 years since I've had formal training." "I'm not sure what to expect," Professor Rodriguez smiled. "Let's start with something simple. Play me a scale, any scale." Lisa placed her hands on the keys and began a basic C major scale. Immediately, she could feel how different her hands felt. Her fingers, which had once moved with fluid precision, now felt stiff and uncertain. The scale that should have been effortless required conscious thought for each note. "Now, try the same scale with your eyes closed," Professor Rodriguez instructed. This was even worse. Without looking at the keys, Lisa made several mistakes, her muscle memory clearly having faded after years of disuse. She stopped halfway through. Frustrated with herself? "I used to be able to play that scale in my sleep," Lisa said, her voice tight with disappointment. "And you will again," Professor Rodriguez said calmly. "But Lisa, you need to understand that what you're attempting is incredibly difficult. You're not just returning to music, you're returning to music at a professional level after a significant break. That requires patience with yourself." Over the following weeks, Lisa threw herself into practice with the same determination that had gotten her through 7 years of double shifts and exhaustion. She arrived at the conservatory every morning at 7 and often didn't leave until after dark. Her days were filled with scales, exercises, and pieces she used to know by heart, but now had to relearn note by note. The physical challenges were immediate and painful. Her hands cramped after just an hour of practice. Her back ached from sitting at the piano bench. Her fingers developed blisters that had to heal before she could practice again. This was muscle conditioning she had lost completely. and rebuilding it was agonizing, but the mental challenges were even harder. Lisa's confidence, which had once been unshakable, was now fragile and inconsistent. Some days she felt like she was making progress, remembering pieces that came back to her in fragments. Other days she couldn't even get through a simple etude. Without making embarrassing mistakes, the worst part was being around the other students. Most of them were in their early 20s and they had never stopped playing. Their fingers flew across the keys with the kind of ease that Lisa remembered having but couldn't access anymore. She could see them watching her sometimes, probably wondering what a woman in her 30s was doing, struggling with pieces they could play perfectly. During her 4th week at the conservatory, Lisa decided to attend a student recital, she thought. It might be inspiring to hear other people perform, but instead it was devastating. Student after student took the stage and delivered polished, confident performances. They played pieces Lisa used to know well, but now they sounded impossibly difficult. A 19-year-old named Amy performed the same Chopin ballade that Lisa had played for her junior recital at Juilliard. Lisa remembered the applause she had received that night, the feeling of musical mastery and artistic expression. Watching Amy play the same piece with apparent ease made Lisa feel like that confident young woman had been someone else entirely. After the recital, Lisa called Robert from her car in the conservatory parking lot. She was crying too hard to drive. "Home, I can't do this," she said when he answered. "I thought I could, but I can't. I'm fooling myself and I'm wasting your money. What happened?" Robert asked, his voice full of concern. Lisa told him about the recital, about watching students who were 10 years younger than her play music that felt beyond her reach. "They're so good, Robert, and they're so young. They have years ahead of them to get even better. I'm starting over at 35. Even if I work as hard as I can, I'll never catch up to where I should be." "Lisa," Robert said gently, "you're not competing with those students. You're not trying to be 22. Again. You're trying to be the best version of yourself at 35, with all the life experience and emotional depth that comes with that." "But what if the best version of myself at 35 isn't good enough?" "Good enough for what?" "To play at Carnegie Hall? Maybe not. But good enough to touch people's hearts with your music?" "Lisa, I heard you do that on your very first night back at the piano. That hasn't disappeared." 2 months into her return to music, the challenges multiplied. Professor Rodriguez suggested that Lisa audition for a small competition at the conservatory, thinking it would be good experience. Lisa reluctantly agreed, but the audition was a disaster. Her hands shook so badly she could barely play, and she forgot an entire section of her prepared piece. The other auditionees were mostly undergraduate students who seemed completely at ease with the process. Lisa overheard 2 of them talking. Afterward, wondering why someone so old was bothering to audition when she clearly wasn't ready, the comment stung more than Lisa expected. She had always been the young prodigy, the one everyone looked up to. Now she was the older student struggling to keep up, and it was humiliating. Things got worse when the local music community started noticing her return. Someone recognized her name from her Juilliard days and mentioned it to a music blogger. Soon there were online articles about the former prodigy turned waitress, who was trying to restart her career with the help of a mysterious benefactor. The articles weren't cruel, but they painted Lisa as either a tragic figure deserving of pity or an opportunist taking advantage of a wealthy patron's generosity. Neither portrayal felt accurate to her experience, but the attention made everything more difficult. The worst moment came during her 5th month of training. David had been calling more frequently, and Lisa could tell something was bothering him. Finally, during one of their conversations, he confronted her directly. "I know about the music," he said without preamble. "I know about what you gave up for me, and I know that your mysterious benefactor is paying for my school because of some deal related to your piano playing." Lisa felt her world tilt. "David, how did you ... I'm not stupid, Lisa. When I started asking questions about my scholarship, things didn't add up. And then I saw one of those articles online about you returning to piano. I put the pieces together." The silence stretched between them for several long moments. I can't accept this. David said finally. I can't let you sacrifice your life for me again. I'll take out loans for my last semester. I'll figure something else out. David, no, Lisa said desperately. You're so close to graduating. You can't quit now. And you can't give up your dreams for me again, David replied. Don't you see? I've been carrying this guilt for years. Knowing that you left school because of me, I won't be responsible for ruining your second chance too. After that conversation, Lisa felt like the walls were closing in from every direction.